The internet froze for a split second when Forbes published what many are now calling one of the most unexpected cultural deep dives of the year. A revelation about the true strategic role of Jungkook in ARIRANG. What initially looked like a respectful artistic nod to Korean heritage has now been reframed as something far more calculated, far more powerful, and if fans are to be believed, far more emotional than anyone was prepared to confront. For years, Jungkook has been celebrated as the golden Maknae of BTS, a nickname that reflects not only his extraordinary versatility but also his almost mythical ability to excel in every artistic field he touches. Vocals, dance, stage charisma, global branding, he has dominated them all. But Forbes' latest analysis suggests that his involvement in ARIRANG was not simply about music, performance, or even patriotism. It was about positioning, about narrative, about legacy. According to the report, Jungkook's participation was never intended to be a passive homage. It was designed as a cultural pivot point, a reintroduction of Korean identity to a generation raised on algorithms and global streaming platforms, and suddenly, what seemed like a beautiful artistic choice now feels like a strategic masterstroke. ARMY, the fiercely loyal global fandom, was not ready. The article describes how industry insiders viewed Jungkook's involvement as symbolic architecture, a phrase that has since gone viral. Symbolic architecture, two words that imply construction, planning, foresight, not spontaneity, not coincidence. The report argues that placing the youngest member of the world's biggest pop group into the narrative space of Korea's most iconic folk melody was a deliberate generational bridge, a message that tradition and modernity do not compete, they converge. This framing changes everything. Because ARIRANG is not just a melody, it is an emotional artifact. It has carried the weight of Korean sorrow, resilience, separation, and hope for centuries. To associate a global pop icon with that melody is to embed him into something larger than charts and awards. It elevates him into cultural symbolism. Forbes went further. The article suggested that Jungkook's vocal tone, often praised for its clarity and emotional elasticity, was specifically chosen to reinterpret ARIRANG in a way that felt contemporary without stripping it of its melancholy core. The phrasing, the restraint, the subtle dynamics, none of it, the report claims, was accidental. And that is where ARMY began spiraling. Because if this was planned, if this was strategic, if this was intentional positioning toward a larger legacy narrative, then what does that mean for his future? Is Jungkook being shaped not just as a global pop star, but as a cultural ambassador whose influence transcends the commercial framework of idol stardom? The speculation exploded overnight. Clips resurfaced, old interviews were dissected, fans revisited moments where Jungkook spoke about tradition, about pride in his roots, about wanting to represent Korea on the world stage. Suddenly, these quotes felt prophetic, intentional, almost like puzzle pieces that only now made sense. Forbes emphasized the timing as well. The global appetite for cultural authenticity has grown significantly in recent years. Audiences crave roots. They crave stories tied to identity. And here stands Jungkook, a figure who commands stadiums across continents, reintroducing a centuries-old melody into contemporary conversation. That juxtaposition is powerful. The report analyzed streaming data spikes following his association with ARIRANG. Interest in the song's history increased, searches for its origins multiplied. Younger listeners who had never engaged with traditional Korean music suddenly found themselves exploring it. That ripple effect is measurable, it is tangible. And this is where the article becomes almost philosophical. Because what does it mean when a pop star becomes a gateway to heritage? It means influence is no longer just about numbers, it is about direction, it is about where those numbers lead people. Forbes framed Jungkook's role as strategic cultural reinforcement, not just representing Korea globally, but reinforcing Korean identity within a globalized system. That's not small, that's monumental. ARMY reactions ranged from pride to emotional overwhelm. Many expressed that they always knew Jungkook carried something deeper in his artistry, but seeing it articulated in a business publication validated that intuition. Others admitted they felt unprepared for the gravity of the implication. Because if Jungkook is stepping into a legacy narrative, then the stakes of every future move become heavier. The article also touched on branding. Jungkook's image has evolved from youthful prodigy to mature global icon. Aligning him with ARIRANG subtly repositions him beyond trend cycles. Trends fade, heritage endures. This is long-term thinking. Industry analysts quoted in the piece argued that this move insulates Jungkook from the volatility that often plagues pop careers. By embedding his identity into something timeless, he transcends the limitations of contemporary fame. But there is another layer. Emotion. Because ARIRANG carries themes of longing and separation. And Jungkook, who has spoken about the loneliness that can accompany global fame, seems almost poetically aligned with that emotional core. Whether intentional or serendipitous, the connection resonates. Fans began sharing edits overlaying his performances with historical imagery. Threads dissected lyrical parallels. Cultural scholars joined conversations praising the revival of discourse around traditional music. The internet did not just react, it transformed. Forbes concluded that Jungkook's involvement in ARIRANG may be remembered as a defining inflection point, not necessarily because of commercial success, but because of narrative recalibration. A moment where a pop star stepped into something ancestral and emerged amplified. That word amplified lingers. Because amplification works both ways, Jungkook amplifies ARIRANG to global audiences. ARIRANG amplifies Jungkook's artistic depth. Symbiosis. An ARMY is still processing. What does this mean for his solo trajectory? Will he continue weaving cultural motifs into future projects? Is this the beginning of a broader artistic evolution where modern production meets traditional storytelling? Or was this a singular, powerful statement designed to anchor his image before his next global leap? No one knows. But the fact that a business publication dissected this moment with such intensity suggests that Jungkook's career is being viewed through a macro lens, not as fleeting entertainment, but as strategic influence. That realization is thrilling and terrifying. Because when expectations rise, pressure follows. Yet if history has shown anything, it is that Jungkook thrives under pressure. He has consistently turned scrutiny into performance fuel, doubt into dominance. And perhaps this is simply the next chapter in that pattern, though calling it a chapter feels too structured for what is unfolding. This feels like evolution. ARMY discussions have shifted from "did you see that?" to "what does this mean?" That shift is significant. It indicates a fandom maturing alongside the artist, thinking beyond virality, considering impact. Forbes may have exposed the strategic dimension, but in doing so, it also highlighted something more human: the hunger for authenticity in an industry often criticized for manufacturing narratives. If Jungkook's association with ARIRANG was strategic, it was also sincere. Strategy without sincerity collapses under scrutiny. The emotional resonance would not exist if it were hollow. And that may be the most powerful takeaway. The article ends by suggesting that Jungkook's role in ARIRANG could become a case study in modern cultural branding, a blueprint for how artists can honor heritage while commanding global markets, a reminder that roots are not limitations, they are launchpads. ARMY may not have been ready, but perhaps readiness is overrated. Sometimes impact arrives before comprehension. Sometimes legacy begins quietly, disguised as a single artistic choice. And sometimes a melody that has echoed through centuries finds new life in the voice of someone who was always meant to carry it forward. If this truly is a strategic positioning move, then the world has just witnessed the subtle laying of a foundation, not for a comeback, not for a chart record, but for something far more enduring. The question now is not whether Jungkook's role in ARIRANG was significant. It is how far that significance will travel. And if this is only the beginning, then ARMY and the world may need to prepare for an era where pop stardom and cultural legacy intertwine in ways we have never seen before.